The private meeting room in Riyadh's royal palace glowed with golden light, the kind that seemed designed to remind visitors of power. Ibrahim Traoré sat across from Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, his eyes steady, his posture unbending despite the opulence around him. The air was thick, not from the scent of expensive oud, but from the clash of two visions for the future of Africa and the Middle East. "You've made bold moves for Burkina Faso," MBS began, his tone smooth, almost playful. "Cutting ties with old powers, building new alliances. But independence is fragile. Temporary." A faint smirk curved his lips, the kind that wasn't just a smile, it was a statement. Traoré leaned back slightly, studying the prince. "Temporary," he echoed, his voice calm but edged with steel. "So was every empire. History is filled with those who thought their dominance was eternal, until it wasn't." For a moment, silence reigned. Outside, the desert wind pushed against the palace walls, as if nature itself leaned in to listen. MBS's eyes narrowed just slightly. "You're young, Ibrahim. Youth has passion, but it often lacks foresight. Power is maintained not just through ideals, but through control, trade, security, influence. You think you can resist forever?" Traoré's gaze sharpened. "Resist?" he said. "I'm not resisting. I'm building. There's a difference. Resistance is defensive. Building is permanent." The prince's smirk faded, replaced by a calculating look. "And yet, every builder eventually faces the storm." Traoré allowed himself a small, knowing smile. "Then I'll face it with my people, while others face it alone in their palaces." The temperature in the room hadn't changed, but the tension made it feel warmer. Advisors along the walls exchanged subtle glances, sensing the conversation was no longer a diplomatic exchange, it was a duel. MBS tapped the arm of his chair thoughtfully, as if measuring his next move. The crown prince leaned forward, his elbows resting on the ornate armrest. "Empires fall," he admitted, his tone shifting into something quieter, more deliberate. "But those who control the flow of resources, they decide how fast they fall. Africa is rich, Ibrahim. Rich in what the world needs. Oil, gold, minerals. That makes you both powerful and vulnerable." Traoré didn't flinch. "And yet, Africa remains poor while others grow rich from what's under our soil. That's not a natural order, it's a choice. A system built by those who preach partnership while tightening the chains." MBS's eyes flashed with a mix of irritation and intrigue. "You speak like a revolutionary, but revolutions without powerful friends burn out quickly. The West may not own you, but it can starve you. And if it doesn't, the markets will." Traoré's voice deepened, each word deliberate. "I am not asking the West for bread. Burkina Faso will plant its own fields, mine its own gold, and sell on its own terms. If markets close their doors, we will build our own." A sharp silence followed, only broken by the faint hum of the air conditioning. The advisors standing by the gilded doors shifted uneasily. These were not the polite, rehearsed exchanges they were used to hearing between leaders. MBS's fingers drummed against the armrest. "You're confident. But confidence doesn't shield you from the wolves circling outside your borders. And they are circling, Ibrahim. Every move you make is being watched, by those who want you to succeed, and those who can't afford for you to." Traoré's eyes locked on the prince's, unwavering. "Then let them watch. Because what they will see is not a man bowing to a throne, but a people standing on their own ground." The prince gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod, as if acknowledging a point well made, though he'd never admit it out loud. The conversation shifted as attendants brought in Arabian coffee, its strong aroma cutting through the tension. Neither man reached for his cup. This wasn't a meeting for pleasantries, it was a battle of visions. MBS broke the silence first. "Ibrahim, independence is a fine word, but it doesn't feed armies or build cities. You'll need investors, infrastructure, supply chains. And those things, they don't appear without alliances. Traoré leaned forward, his voice calm but unyielding. Alliances built on equal ground, yes. But alliances where one stands tall while the other kneels? Those are chains, dressed in gold. I've seen enough of them to know the cost. The prince smirked again, but there was an edge to it now. Every nation kneels to someone, sooner or later. Even the ones that believe they're free. History proves that. Traoré's reply came without hesitation. History also proves that every empire believes it is eternal, until it isn't. Independence may be difficult to keep, but empires have an even harder time surviving their own arrogance. The words hung heavy in the air, and for a moment, the vast hall seemed smaller, the space between them charged. A flicker of something, respect, maybe, passed over MBS's face, quickly replaced by his usual composure. You're bold, he said finally. That will make you dangerous to some, and useful to others. I'm not here to be useful, Traoré answered. I'm here to make sure the next generation of my people never have to ask permission to stand. Outside, the late afternoon sun dipped lower over Riyadh's skyline, casting long shadows across the palace floor. Both men knew that while this meeting would end in a handshake, its consequences would stretch far beyond the walls of the gilded hall. The ceremonial aides stepped back as the two leaders rose from their seats. But instead of heading toward the grand exit, MBS gestured toward a massive balcony overlooking Riyadh. Come, he said, I want you to see something. They stepped into the warm evening air. Below, the city stretched endlessly. Glass towers catching the sun's last light, wide avenues bustling with traffic, construction cranes peppering the skyline. This, MBS said, sweeping his hand across the horizon, is what vision and capital can build. 10 years ago, much of this was sand. Now, it is the future. Traoré took in the view, acknowledging the transformation. Impressive, he admitted. But tell me, how many of those towers belong to your people? And how many to those who simply rent your land while taking the wealth elsewhere? The question struck like a subtle blow. MBS didn't answer immediately. Ownership is complicated, he said finally. Partnerships drive progress. Without them, the pace slows. And the world moves fast. Traoré leaned against the marble railing, his gaze steady. Sometimes moving slower means you actually arrive. Sometimes chasing speed only leads you in circles, faster and faster, until you collapse. The prince's expression hardened just slightly, the first sign that the young African leader's words were finding their mark. And what do you think will happen if you refuse to play the game? The world doesn't wait for those who step aside. Traoré's lips curved into a faint, defiant smile. Then I suppose we'll just have to build a world that plays by our rules instead. Behind them, the palace staff exchanged uneasy glances. They could sense that what was unfolding wasn't just diplomatic banter, it was a clash of philosophies that could define alliances, rivalries, and the balance of power in the years to come. As night fell over Riyadh, the two leaders moved back inside, where a private dinner had been arranged. Gold-plated dishes, crystal glasses, and rare spices filled the table. The air smelled of saffron and roasted lamb, but the tension between the two men was stronger than the fragrance. MBS broke the silence first. I've met many African leaders, he said, slicing into his meal, and most of them understood one thing: survival often means compromise. You speak as if you can stand apart from the world's currents. That's not bravery, Traoré, it's naivety. Traoré calmly set down his fork. And I've met many powerful men, he replied, who believed their wealth insulated them from reality. But the tide always comes in, Your Highness. Empires always think they're permanent, until they're not. The prince chuckled softly, though his eyes were sharp. So you believe Burkina Faso will outlast the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia? I believe, Traoré said, leaning forward, that a nation built on self-reliance and unity can outlast any empire built on fear and dependency. It's not about the size of the army or the depth of the treasury, it's about whether your people would still stand with you if all that vanished tomorrow. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning. Then MBS responded, "You talk of unity as if it were a shield. But the world's predators don't respect shields, they respect power." Traoré didn't flinch. Power without principle is just another form of weakness. And weakness, no matter how well it dresses, eventually falls. One of MBS's advisors shifted uncomfortably in his chair, as if sensing the conversation was pushing the boundaries of diplomacy. But neither man seemed willing to retreat. This was no longer a dinner, it was a duel. The next morning, the sun over Riyadh turned the city's glass towers into mirrors of gold. Traoré stood on the palace balcony, hands clasped behind his back, watching the bustle below. MBS joined him, the two men framed by the skyline, a kingdom of oil wealth and ancient deserts. "You see," MBS began, gesturing toward the city, "this is what stability looks like. Skyscrapers rising from the sand. Roads without potholes. Lights that never go out. This is the result of aligning with the powerful, not resisting them." Traoré glanced at the streets, then back at the prince. "It's impressive," he admitted. "But stability built on another man's terms is just a fragile illusion. What happens when the power you lean on decides it no longer needs you?" The prince smiled faintly. "We make sure they always need us. That's the art of survival in the modern age." "Or," Traoré countered, "you make sure you never need them in the first place. That's the art of freedom." MBS's expression shifted, still polite, but edged with irritation. "You speak like a man who's never faced the full weight of global pressure. Sanctions. Economic isolation. Media campaigns designed to destroy your image. Do you think you can simply walk through that storm untouched?" "I don't expect to walk through untouched," Traoré replied. "I expect to walk through standing." The words hung in the air. For a moment, MBS studied him, not as a naive African leader, but as a man willing to risk everything for a principle. It was a language the prince understood, even if he didn't agree with it. Far below, the call to prayer echoed through the city, a reminder of faith and time. But here on the balcony, the real prayer was unspoken: who would bend first, and who would still be standing when the other finally did? That evening, a private dinner was arranged in a hall decorated with intricate arabesque patterns and soft golden lighting. The table stretched long, set with silver platters of lamb, rice, and dates. Every detail was calculated to impress, a demonstration of wealth and hospitality. As they ate, MBS shifted the conversation from pleasantries to strategy. "Burkina Faso's push for self-reliance is admirable," he began, "but without strategic alliances, you'll find your progress interrupted." Traoré set down his glass slowly. "Interrupted by whom?" "By those who believe resources should serve the global order, not individual ambition," MBS replied, his tone calm but laced with warning. "In your case, that means they will test you. They'll test how far your independence can stretch before it snaps." Traoré leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the prince. "Let them test. The difference between us is that my people know hardship. We've walked through storms without a single hand to guide us. That makes us harder to break than anyone expects." MBS smirked, sipping his tea. "Harder to break, perhaps. But unbreakable? No. Every empire, every movement, every leader eventually bends. Independence is temporary. And so was every empire," Traoré answered without missing a beat. The words landed heavy. For a moment, even the quiet rustle of the servant's footsteps seemed to fade. MBS tilted his head, studying him as though weighing the cost of underestimating this man. "You speak boldly," the prince said finally. "I hope your future is as strong as your words." Traoré smiled faintly. The future doesn't have to be strong, it just has to belong to us. The rest of the meal was quieter, but under the surface, the real conversation had already been decided. Neither man intended to yield. The next morning, Traoré was invited to tour one of Riyadh's ambitious megaprojects, a city rising from the desert, designed to showcase Saudi Arabia's vision for the future. Glass towers glistened in the sun, construction cranes dotted the skyline, and the air buzzed with the sound of relentless progress. MBS walked beside him, gesturing toward the horizon. This is what happens when leadership meets limitless resources. We build not just for today, but for centuries. Traoré glanced at the towering structures, then at the workers laboring under the harsh sun. It's impressive, he admitted. But I wonder, how much of this belongs to the people who live here, and how much belongs to the crown? The prince's eyes narrowed. It belongs to the nation. The crown is the nation. In my country, Traoré replied, the nation is the people. The leader is only their voice. And voices are not owned. They stopped at a viewing platform overlooking the city's foundations. MBS folded his arms. You think your model will outlast mine? Traoré didn't hesitate. I think my model will survive without me. That's the point. The comment caught the prince off guard. For leaders accustomed to consolidating power, the idea of building something that could exist without them was alien. MBS's smirk faded briefly before returning, sharper this time. You speak as though your destiny is already secured, he said. Traoré looked out at the vast desert, his voice steady. It is, because it isn't mine alone. The wind swept across the platform, carrying grains of sand between them. It was more than a conversation, it was a clash of visions, two definitions of power meeting in the middle of the desert. That evening, a private dinner was arranged in a secluded royal courtyard lit by golden lanterns. Musicians played softly in the background, their melodies weaving through the warm desert air. At the long table, dishes of lamb, rice, and spiced vegetables were served with meticulous care. MBS raised his glass. To partnerships that can change the future. Traoré mirrored the gesture but kept his gaze steady. To futures decided by the people who will live in them. The subtle tension between them was palpable, even amid the elegance of the setting. The prince leaned forward. I admire your defiance, but history is not kind to nations that turn away from powerful allies. Independence is admirable, but alliances are survival. Traoré took a slow sip before replying. Survival without dignity is not life, it's captivity. My people choose freedom, even if the path is harder. For a moment, the courtyard fell silent except for the music. MBS studied him as if measuring the weight of those words. Finally, he said, perhaps you are not the leader I expected. Most come here seeking wealth, power, or favor. And yet, Traoré answered, you invited me anyway. Maybe you wanted to see if I could be moved. The prince allowed a faint smile. Or maybe I wanted to see if you could move me. It was an unexpected admission, one that hinted at respect beneath the rivalry. The evening ended without an agreement, but with an understanding. Neither man would yield his vision, but both had recognized the other's resolve. The night sky above Riyadh glittered with stars, a reminder that even the greatest empires exist under something far older and more enduring than any crown or flag. The next morning, Traoré prepared to leave Riyadh. The motorcade was ready, but before stepping into his car, he turned to face MBS, who had come to see him off. Cameras were present, though neither man seemed to care about the optics. They were speaking to each other, not the world. MBS smirked slightly, repeating the line from their first meeting. Your independence is temporary. This time, Traoré didn't hesitate. He stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. So was every empire. The words cut through the air like a blade, and for a brief moment, the prince's smirk faded. The exchange was short, but it carried the weight of centuries, of nations that rose and fell, of people who resisted and endured. Both leaders knew the message would echo far beyond the palace gates. On the flight back to Burkina Faso, Traoré looked out the window at the endless stretch of desert below. He thought of the countless leaders who had sat across from powerful rulers, tempted by promises or threatened with consequences. He knew he had chosen the harder road, but it was one his people expected him to walk. In Ouagadougou, crowds gathered at the airport, waving flags and chanting his name. They didn't need to know every detail of what had been said, they could see in his eyes that he had not bent, had not sold their future for comfort or security. Traoré raised his hand to the crowd and spoke into the waiting microphones. "We will not trade our dignity for anyone's approval. We will shape our destiny, not as guests at someone else's table, but as hosts at our own." The cheers thundered through the capital, carrying his words into every street, every home, every heart. And somewhere far away, in the gilded halls of Riyadh, MBS sat in silence, perhaps realizing that some leaders cannot be bought or broken. Nations are not defined by the power they borrow, but by the strength they refuse to surrender. We are not here to extend the life of empires long past their prime. We are here to build something that belongs to us, to our people, to our future. And if the world wishes to watch, let them watch. We will not ask for permission, we will not bow for approval. Because the greatest victory is not in conquering others, it is in never letting anyone conquer you.